Over the last 10, 15 years, there have been people all over the UK, all over the world, who've been making podcasts and being interviewed regarding their history with the police, the courts, crime, and their existence basically. And I have never been able to do such a thing, simply because from the age of 16 to 19, when it was first criminalised, no one ever found out about it, not from my mouth. I never spoke about it. I was deeply embarrassed about it. I come to be known as the only innocent man in the jail, and that was a record that stuck for a number of years, right up to this very day. There's officials everywhere who knows exactly what is taking place and what we are suffering and what we have suffered. There's no one can forget, because we know that everyone was speaking about it. And who told us that? The officials themselves. A lot of them cried about it. And I think it's time we come together to try and understand the justice service that's been provided for in Scotland and try to figure out how to fix it. Seriously, before it's too late. So a lot of what I've been saying there, we'll get into more in depth as the visual presentations continue, and hopefully they will get better. Now, I am suggesting what can be done today, and we have looked at justice committees, I have looked at everything. Seriously, I'm not going to bore the back legs off anyone to tell you what I have read, what I am aware of, what I am knowledgeable of. We're going to forget all that. These things will come out and they'll become apparent when I'm explaining different legal points and different legal situations going through. But first, I'd like to give you an example of the kind of court cases that has been happening in Scotland. So detracting completely away from a really in-depth, informed visual presentation in which we can discuss what can be happening today, I'm going to just continue with this video. And I'm going to continue with a description of a case that came in 1995. And the reason I picked this particular case is because it is in the middle of what has happened prior to that, since I was 16, and it's what's happened since then. Okay? And I think this is a very good example. The extent of how good an example this case is, I am not going to express or going into detail why it is, but it is concerning the whole procedure by police and the courts that always appeared to undertake itself only when I was in the court. So you've got a repetitious abuse of solicitors who are not representing the case as it should be between the age of 16 and 19. Around about the ages of 22 to 23, some seriously terrible things have happened in life in which, where you're doing business degrees, you're running businesses, there's an awful lot of things go on, and that is absolutely ruined. So what you do is you travel through, and myself coming from the central belt in Scotland, I travelled through to the east coast and got to the city of Edinburgh. Whilst driving through the city centre, I stopped to get a refreshment from a place that sells refreshments, we'll call it that. And whilst there, I got, and talking with other people, it was discovered that there was painting and decorating jobs going, and a painter and decorator was required to paint an elderly's house, right? So this elderly was to come in the next again day and speak about this. And there was a man called Tommy, a really good man, an African man that was brought up in London for most of his life. And I think from the age of 26, 27, he'd come to live in Edinburgh, and he played guitar. He was a fair enough guitarist and singer, although he would never admit to that. He would laugh that off. we had a really good time playing the guitars together and entertaining people. With comedy, all different things. We really bounced well together in comedy. We came up with the most ridiculous of stuff. And this is exactly what I needed at that time. My intention was to go down south. I was only travelling through Edinburgh to get to the A1 to go down south and potentially leave the country at that time because the pressures, the police depended on the primary divisions, no matter which area in Scotland I went to. So when I was going through there, stopped for the refreshments, found out the paint and decorating job, hung about for a day to get the job, okay? And continued to spend my days with Tommy as this elderly would go about his own business and the house would be not allocated to me, it would be closed. I could only do the work when he was there, basically. And he was out most of the day. Didn't know where he went, what he'd done, what was going on. I just knew I had to stay with Tommy to get the word, to get when I could arrive at the house. And sometimes that was for whole days where he wouldn't be going out at all. So it worked okay for me. I had a place to stay, I was getting paid for what I was doing. And I was really needed the burst of comedy and humour and the music that we were playing at that time and that new company. We really needed that. I really needed that. I definitely needed that. I had worked hard at a business degree, which I've eventually succeeded in. Well, I got it on time. I mean, I passed my degree, but I only done 3 months of the course before the police were involved in interfering with the man who was doing the coursework. And this was all discussed within the first 3 months about what was going on, and he agreed with that. But he'd also said to me, he goes, but James, he goes, you shouldn't even be on this course. He goes, you're far more advanced. You're 4th or 5th year. If you really wanted to do a 5th year in business studies, where you'd be looking at various things. And I says, well, I already understand that. I goes, but I don't see it in this course. He goes, exactly what I'm saying. So after 3 months, I just didn't go back to the course. And after a year, I got my certificate through with a letter saying that I deserved it. I had not only thoroughly took his course operation to bits, and showed how it could be better done, but he'd actually taken that example into his 2nd year and had decided to modify his coursework and payments for his coursework in a way where it was more beneficial to him and beneficial to the students because of the type of direction the coursework he was doing. So there were an awful lot of things that he learned from me, and that's what I find throughout my life. Everywhere I go, people learn from me because I just apply common sense, basically. So that's what I'd done in Edinburgh. There's a place for refreshment, there's good company, right, this is taking my mind off all of this, right, I can make money right away. And this was really great stuff. And it was only 300, and the man insisted, I was going to be doing this for £100, right, the man insisted 300, which I never got, I never ever did get it. But I was getting paid day by day up to the 300 basically. So I get £20 here and £20 there. And then one night there was a phone call that we had to go up to a place to carry the man out into a taxi, right? And then carry him upstairs. And this was a regular pattern where, because the man couldn't walk, his legs had gone, he could walk very little, he couldn't climb stairs anymore, and he lived 2 flights up. And there was a regular pattern that people would take him home and carry him upstairs and make sure he was okay, lock his door, put the key through the door. So this had been going on for a while. And he was really good friends with a group of people. And they all looked after each other. And I was there in that place when Tommy was relied upon to come up and jump in the taxi and take him home. And I was asked if I was there, so I was like, yeah, let's go and do that. So there's things like that on the go, and requests during the day to go and get shopping and pick up different things. And I was doing that as well. But generally, I didn't go hungry. I didn't not have money in my pocket. And I was quite happy doing what I was doing, looking about myself to see what kind of opportunities could open up in Edinburgh, with a business degree, and the way I can look at people's businesses and really brush them up, polish them right up so they're more refined and they work better. And I've been getting that information for years for nothing. It's something people get paid a very large salary for. But anyway, here we are in a situation where much later I've almost finished the flat. I've almost decorated it all in the time that was allocated to me. And it's looking really good. The man's really chuffed, his spirits are up, everything else is up. And so you've got this impression. This guy is an elderly guy. He's something like 6 to 8 years of age at the time. He's wearing an old man type style hat. This London, a lot of Londoners, I don't even know the name of the hat, but a lot of Londoners wore them. The spivs used to wear them, and so it's that type of style of hat. And he had a corduroy tweed type style jacket on, right? So this was tweeded on the inside and corduroy on the outside. An old age pensioner's jacket. He had a pair of brown sort of flannel, it was sort of just normal suit trousers, brown ones, with the knees that buckled out because he was always sitting down. So when he stood up, you noticed it. And a pair of brown shoes. So this is how this man dressed. He dressed like an old age pensioner, and like every other old age pensioner that goes, whether brown, beige, or whatever, he was in that tweed corduroy element of his life with a wee spiv kind of type hat on it. And that's how he looked. He had a walking stick. He had this Zimmer frame that he tried to use, but he got so cheesed off with it. He ended up with 2 walking sticks, and then he was getting carried about, like I say. But the guy had a heart of gold. His spirit was really a fighting spirit. He wouldn't let this get him down. He really enjoyed the cricket. So during the cricket season, that's when we got a lot of the work done in the house. And then one night, I'm sitting, I'd went to Falkirk, and I was tidying up a few loose ends, dealing with the house there, grabbing what stuff I could fit into the car. And I got a phone call, and it was, could I go through? Max is no well, this, that, and the next thing. So I didn't even know where he was. This person couldn't tell me, and I'd asked, but he couldn't tell me where he was. So I had assumed that I didn't actually go to the house. So I went through to Edinburgh on the train, went to the house, no answer. Found him in this club, which when he left that club, he took his friends with him and ended up in the Western Hills bar hotel, which is just up the road from his flat. So you maybe call me naive, but I didn't know that this woman was a lady of the night sort of a thing. She certainly didn't come across like that. She was quite a funny lassie. We had a rip-roaring laugh together. And this boy's sitting talking away with her, and they've known each other for a long time. If I remember correctly, I was later told that he'd known her when she first came into Edinburgh. She wasn't actually free here, and he had helped her out in a big way, so he was like a father type figure to her. And at some point, I'd just done the karaoke, right? And the prizes were being announced, and I got second prize. And I was going up to pick up my prize when, I don't know, it must have been about 14, 15 police officers in uniform and plain clothes came in the door, right? Now, it was strange that I had come through to Edinburgh and haven't been told that this boy was no well. Because when I found him in a club, there was also other people that turned up, and this woman was one of them, to make sure he was all right and get him home. So this was a really strange thing, that I found him in a club and he was still continuing to go when he was supposed to be exhausted, fatigued, and falling asleep in the corner, and not looking too great. So they really needed to take him home. I was phoned. They didn't expect me to be in Falkirk, but I just said aye and went straight through on the train anyway. But the wasted time feeling had happened in me before me and the lassie started having a really good laugh, and I started to sort of enjoy what I was doing, because deep down I was pretty miffed I had to go through in the first place. I just go to Falkirk really, and I was in the middle of everything, and there was a lot more to be done and sort out, and I didn't want to leave unfinished sort of thing. But when this boy had had this lassie's company, I really didn't get much communication with him. I wasn't really involved, but I was invited to go along to the hotel. And then it was a case of I was doing karaoke. I was asked to go back up. I done another couple of songs. I come second in the competition. It was a lassie who had a terrific voice. She really nailed it. And she was singing Lady in Red. You couldn't believe this. A lassie singing Lady in Red, and it was absolutely brilliant. But that beat me for the top prize when the Polish come bursting in. And I'm busy going to stand up at the time, and when I see this, I sit back down. Because I didn't want to go forward and walk into whatever situation they're there to uncover or look at. And as far as I'm concerned, nothing's happened. Everybody's enjoying themselves. The karaoke's been a good night. There's been no fighting, no arguments, no nothing. And it's the first thing that happens when the Poles come in. Everybody looks at them and then looks round the boot, wondering what's going on. And I'm watching all this because I've got like a 180, more than 180 degree angle on the whole entire place, and everybody that was there because of the position I was sitting in. So the Poles come straight out to us and ask me my name, and the Poles also ask the guy and the lassie for their names. And the minute we give them our names, they tell us to come with them, and they take us all outside, right, the three of us outside. And I'm looking back, and I'm thinking, the Poles are gone to no one else. There's a couple went out to the bar staff, and what is this about? And I know I'm not being rejected with being in a strange hotel or a bar or that. I know this is nothing that's adverse towards me because I've been made more welcome, especially after a sign. So, and there are an awful lot of people that knew this boy. So he was a local and a regular user of this Western Hotels bar. So I was in with him. There was talks about, I can remember being asked if one of the guys decorating the flat and being told there might be more work there for me. And I'm saying, aye, you got a list of addresses that's needing done. So this was something on that particular night. You know, there were an awful lot of things happening. I felt great. I was playing with Tommy on the guitar. I was doing comedic stuff with him. We were making an awful lot of people laugh. Tommy was saying things like, he would call me Jimmy. He goes, for you turned up, Jimmy. He goes, everybody's been so much happier. He goes, it doesn't matter where your face. He goes, it suits, it fits in, and you say the right thing at the right time, and it's so funny. And as he was saying that, he was laughing and I was reminding things that we'd been saying together, sort of a thing, Tommy was a really good laugh. The music was there. I was doing karaoke. I was working. I was painting. I was feeding myself. I was getting newer clays. I was sorting things out. I was back to the house to sort that out. And then this happens. So I'm outside. And one of the things is I am absolutely bewildered that I am being pulled out, and along with this guy at his age, right? So I'm looking suspiciously at this lassie because I'm thinking, this is something that she's done. That's what I initially think. And the Polish come out with these jackets, and there's my jacket, which is a biking jacket type style jacket, right? And that suits, that fits the attire that I am wearing at the time. And it's quite obvious to see that that's my jacket, especially when it stood next to this corduroy tweed thing and one of these hats, right? So you've got police officers picking up the clays that was left behind when we were taking out, which was the jackets and this boy's hat. And they were standing with a long black jacket that obviously it was a female's jacket, right? And a bag, because nobody was allowed to lift anything at all, to leave everyone behind, just come as we were. So with this bag, so the police themselves had assorted these items, these garments with the long jacket with the bag. They had put the hat with the tweed jacket, and they'd held the biking jacket on its own. And really looking to me to confirm that it's mine. So it's quite obvious whose clothes those are, right? And who wears what. Just by our seating arrangements, where the clothes were, where the police picked them up from, all of that, right? I must add that I've never had cats, right? So there would be no forensics of cat hair on my person, other than the odd hair it might be there for having been in this boy's house because I had a cat. And I had cleaned the flat. I had cleaned, not only painted it, but I'd cleaned it. And cleaned the carpets, the flares, scrubbed the kitchen, started painting the kitchen, glossing it and stuff before this happened. So I might have had a cat hair on me someplace. But the general gist is, no, I wouldn't be covered in cat hair the same as that jacket, right? And that jacket and the hat, which had cat hair inside and out of it. It was something the guy just didn't bother about. He just really didn't bother. And I think he was at that age, he knows he's on his way out. He's trying to have the last final firework blast in his life and keep up a continuity with guys that are younger than him that he's met, who he's always socialised with. And that's what kept him in Edinburgh. He was quite a character and quite a spiv if you think about it. He first arrived here in a TR7 sports car, an open top with a goat in the passenger seat strapped to the gear stick. And a strap to the door handle. And that's how we drove up from London and into Edinburgh. I can just see that, back in that day, It's probably a thing that we've seen all over, the animals and cars stopped into estates and that, but I got in a TR7 and somebody that looked like the boy, it'd been quite a comical thing. It's almost like a Fawlty Towers, not a Fawlty Towers, what do you call them? The Crazy Boys sketch. Can't mind who they are now. So the long and short of it is, this lassie's looking guilty. She's also behaving guilty. She's sitting going, this has nothing to do. The boy's just answered his name, right? He said nothing. I've answered my name, said nothing, and I'm looking about what could this be. And this lassie's gone, this has nothing to do with me. I'm just sitting here, and I know this man here. I don't know who this guy is. We've had a bit of a drink and we've had a laugh, and she's rattling on like that, and she's trying to distance herself with something, right? And I'm thinking to myself, what's going on, right? What is she all about? I have it firmly in my head that whatever's happening here, that this lassie is 100% solely responsible for it, right? And because we've confirmed whose jackets they are, right? The police say to us, and because of this lassie's outburst, basically, the police say to us, right, you're all going to have to come back to the station. So he goes back to the station, and we're putting into cells for quite a while. And then I was taken out the cell and put into a room. It didn't even look like a questioning room. It looked like the CID's own office type style room. And I was taken into there. And strangely enough, I sat on the side of the desk in which whoever had the office would have sat. And the CID sat on the other side. Well, when they sat the other side, but they were mainly storming about, banging the desk and shouting at me, right? Mainly, in the main. I was only taken out the cell, right? To be put into this room. To be told by Detective Sergeant David Bullen, right? Who used to work in Falkirk, who now was working in Edinburgh and was part of the drug squad, right? And he's banging the desk about how he knows me from Falkirk, and I'm sitting thinking about, yep, that's when I was criminalised and I went through all that hell for that 4 years, which brings me to here because you screwed my house up. And that's why I'm here, now you're on my case saying what to me, right? And this boy's saying to me, didn't worry about it. So when we're going into the station and he shouts that to me, basically, didn't worry about it, I know not to talk, I know not to fucking rattle on, because I didn't care what I'm saying, because I didn't care what's going on. I didn't want to ask questions for answers that I know he maybe can't tell me, or she can't maybe tell me, So he told me not to worry about it, but that told me that he knew something about whatever it was that was going on at that time. And in this office, right, I've got this CID guy storming about, how he, in a triumphant, really angered manner, right, and rattling on about 10 years I've been trying to get you. And I'm sitting thinking back, the last 10 years, and I'm going, well, aye, that's how long. It's not as long as the police have been on my back, but you've been about in that time, and you accelerated through the ranks, and you have been trying all sorts, but I'm not a criminal. I'm not doing anything wrong. You've got to understand, I'm sitting in your freaking office because of some other bent, warped, shaped idea that somebody in the police has come up with to have me here. Because in the circumstances, you shouldn't be rattling on about me like this. So I'm thinking of that, and I'm not answering anything back, but this is what I'm thinking about. This guy's gone storming about saying, 10 years I've been trying to get you, and now I've got you. And I'm like thinking, got me for what? What have you got me for? But here I am, I'm in Edinburgh, by a guy who's hell-bent on getting something. Just the fact that it's my name, right? And he's also either believing the false character profiling, or he's believing the offences that came against me that was genuinely guilty for him, and that's impossible, because he knew how they came about. He was there when the CID that was proactive in making these charges stick in a court through various means, and then deflected in courts wherever being dealt with through various means. And so whether an awful lot of things that's wrong with the justice system, I know what could have been done then, I know what should have been done, and that never happened. Things have continued, and that's why I'm making a video of the day about 1995. So here I am, faced with this guy who thinks he's won some sort of battle, storming about with these big boots on, make a hell of a noise. And I did come to write a song, I'll Wear Bullen's Boots, and I sang that for years. It's quite a good song, I just need to change the words to make it into something that's half decent, so we didn't need to mention Bullen or his boots. So I didn't want to wear his boots, he can wear his own boots, he deserves them. But this guy's aiming an angle at me that I'm responsible for 7.5 ounces of amphetamine, right? And the reason the guy is extra triumphant, right, was the good news was, as far as he was concerned, was that it's proven on their system at that point to be 98% proof, which is completely impossible, right? And when I went back down to the cells, because I wasn't really questioned or anything, I was just, this guy's having his 15-20 minutes or whatever it was, rubbing it into me, that he's now got me and it's all this amphetamine. He's threatening me with 10 years, and he's also suggesting that he'll be writing reports to make sure that happens. And I thought, right, nice one, try that. Now, I don't know who is exactly responsible for anything at this time, right? So we go down to a police station and gets held in these cells. We were separated from one end to the other for each other, me and the boy, and so was the lassie. And we went to court. But the lassie was let out for giving evidence. And what the evidence was a statement that says, I believe that one of the gentlemen that I was with tonight had £2,000 worth of speedy stuff, right? Now, some might argue that the terminology speedy stuff might refer to, or maybe imply that she doesn't know anything about a Class B drug, as it was at the time. I think it still is. And she doesn't know anything about that, and it's a kind of speedy stuff, you know? Some would argue that that's what she was implying when she said it in that way, right? Where later we'll come to find out what I think it meant, and she had a knowledge of. And certainly my elderly friend, definitely had a knowledge of. So this is just for implication, did she know? Because it's something that he would never confirm to me, and I think she must have done. And in some respects, I quite believe that's how it was transported, right? Just because of that one line and that one statement, and the fact that who she was and how she was let out the equation, that shouldn't have happened naturally either. Because in the statements, they preclude to see that I am there, just in the hotel at that point. There's nothing to say I was anywhere else, but what they two talk about is how they met up somewhere else, and then how the 3 years went to there. So this sort of suggests I was somewhere else, but I'm not involved in anything that happened in the statements. Previously, because I wasn't involved, I just wasn't involved even though I was there. I left with them. It's just a situation that one of these things where you're called to do one thing, the next thing happens, then you're getting a taxi to there, you're having a few drinks there. And I might add, I didn't drink, and I've not drank for years. But in 1995, a few drinks there, and then you're going back to this boy's house. You're going to get up and do some sort of decorating and get back to the house that you've left behind in Falkirk and sort out the rest of that, right? So, and what I'm looking for in this house in Falkirk is bits for the elderly guy's house, right? But here we are, we're in the jail now. It's something like, it's January. It might have been December. I think it was beginning of January 1995. And we go to court, and there's no clear declaration being made, right? And we're remanded in custody. So for a 7-day lie down, it's known in Scotland, I had to drag this guy about in a barra that normally dragged the dixies that carried the food from hall to hall. It wasn't the proper food barrows then, it was dixies that went onto barrows that just pulled everything else, it pulled the rubbish, it pulled the food, it pulled everything. And that's just the way it worked. And I would take him along to the dining hall on this barrow because he couldn't walk the length of it. He could hardly get up to go to his piss pot, as it was at the time, because there was no toilets. There's no TV, that didn't exist. So on medical grounds, when we appeared back at court, I thought I would definitely get bail because I've absolutely nothing to do with this. I've not been interviewed, but I've not spoken anywhere to be commented about on anything that I've said. I've not contested anything. There's no challenge that I've made to the legal challenge that's coming against me. There's no real reason to remand me in custody when the lassie got out the week before, and my co-accused, who he is now getting out as well. When it came to me, I was getting further remanded, and I got remanded for a further 110 days with a 30-day extension, then a further 30-day extension. And this was hellish because whilst I was remanded, right, I'm not going to mention who it was or who he is, because of the very reason of who he is. But unfortunately, there was a man who was remanded in custody at the same time as me. And he had a specialised education in certain fields. And he was very knowledgeable at his age, very mature in that field and in that study. And he was at the top of his game. He taught the subject, he practiced the subject, he worked in the subject, he was a leader in the subject, basically. And he would never, ever, ever leave his cell. He'd very rarely come out. And if it was to just go in to get something, a bit of paper, another pen, empty his pot, and then back to the cell. So whilst he was out one day, I said to him, "Do you play chess?" And he said, "Yes." He goes, "I would absolutely love a game of chess," and told me that I couldn't beat him. So we went into his cell. I says to the prison officer, "It's all right if I go and play him a game of chess?" And the prison officer confirmed with him that would be all right. And then the prison officer said, "Yep, that would be all right." He goes, "But I would need to lock the door." because the guy wouldn't sit with the door open when everybody else was going about. And I said, that's all right with me. So he goes into the cell, plays a game of chess, beats someone in about 3 minutes, and he couldn't believe it. So we set the board up in a hurried fashion to play again. And again, I beat him. It was about 8 minutes this time, because I thought, right, I'll see how his game develops. And by the third time, I started to play him as if he was a learner and didn't know much about chess, and allowed him to make mistakes and allowed him to take them back as I pointed them out as he was going. And I play a lot of people like that, where I give them the best game they can get for their initial move. And sometimes that means taking that back so they can defend well and battle well against me on the board. Because I know what my game is. I know what would potentially stop me in my line of tracks and my line of thinking. So there's a way of teaching people chess to play that way. And they're looking at a game that you're actually playing internally within yourself and allowing them to learn for that. And they're really just involved to move them in, mistakenly or otherwise. And I guess both of us learn chess at that, because when it comes to play somebody who can play chess, then you've not got all that involved, and you can just single track it down to playing your own game, which makes the game a hell of a lot easier. And life is much the same. But whilst playing this man at chess, and I've got to add, I played him at chess for about, I don't know, 2.5 months, 3 months. It sounds like we're a plane going to crash there. Aye, I played him at chess for 2 to 3 months before I went to court. And he never won a game ever. He didn't even get close to it, and he couldn't work it out. He'd be really disgruntled and jumping up, and he goes, "Why can't I not win?" He'd be really, really peeved off with all this. I hope I've not got a stunt captain in the sky here. Doing stunts above the house. It's the last thing we need. It's an accident there. Oh, it's kind of like we've got. But this was incredible stuff. Because with him, because amphetamine was involved, right? Now this is a crucial bit. I'd come back 98% proof in the test that the police had done. And when it went to Strathclyde Forensics, they sent it back as 99% proof, which was impossible. The strongest grade amphetamine that you would get on the street that would see being a powerful amphetamine is recognised by the courts, we were about 3%. So anything between 1 and 3% would be the general standard of any kind of amphetamine that was getting sold on the black market. So to have something that was at 99%, was impossible. No one would have lived if you look at it that way. But what it was, right, is the powder was never amphetamine. At no time at all was there any amphetamine or a classified drug involved in what the police had taken from the jacket, the tweed jacket, right? There was nothing involved at all. And what it was lignocaine and noradrenaline. And for those who don't know, noradrenaline is a cardiovascular stimulant, and lignocaine is an anaesthetic. And apparently when you mix the both of them together and you snort them up your nose, right, you get those both effects. You get an anaesthetised effect to the brain. At the same time, you've got a cardiovascular effect. So people who were, it turned out, I mean, I learned this from a co-accused in remand in the first week, that I had nothing to worry about. This wasn't a classified drug. The most that they could come up with is selling a drug without a license or being in possession of a drug without a license because he's not actually selling anything. But they're trying to do both of us with possession with intent to supply and concerned in the supply. And the charges read like how only like the creative writing brigade could come up with. Only they could frame such a libel in such a way to condemn us and make it look like this is something that should be in the High Court. Right, think of that. Right, I'm going to the Edinburgh High Court for this case. So whilst I'm doing my period in remand, I'm getting sent documents that this man's managing to get in, and I'm reading all about gas liquid testing, different electrical tests that had to be done on this particular powder, first initially to separate the powder, right? That's what the man suggested, that's what the document suggested. He actually wrote papers for me when he was in his cell at night, and to give me the minutes to gain date and tell me to read them. So I was picking up, I was really getting taught for the best on these powders, how to separate them, what kind of tests to ask the forensic department to do in order to separate the powders so they could be tested for what they truly are. And that had to be done. So there was gas testing, electrical testing to separate these powders. And there was other tests to test. There was specific tests to test for noradrenaline and lignocaine to identify the powders. So I had made an application through the solicitors or to the solicitors for an independent forensic analysis of the powder to be done. And I was told that there had been some taken by the legal defence team to have it analysed because they themselves couldn't believe that something was sitting at 99% proof and thought there was something seriously wrong with that. And it was wide open to question. So you're sitting there and you've gone through all this time in remand, and you're saying to your legal team, look, can you make applications to the High Court on the basis of this report? That this isn't a classified drug. And they said they would. And that was the understanding that came to the legal team after this man that was remanded producing the report, explaining in fine detail what had to be done to this particular powder, discover what it was. And because I had a 99% and starting off with a 98% proof on two tests that had been done, the Crown seemed to be happy to continue with the first of the forensic examinations. I'm under the impression the legal team is getting a further forensic examination done on the back of this report, and I'm under the impression that they are also applying for High Court bail under the circumstances. Weeks go by and you don't hear anything from your legal team. Each time the bail call out, the High Court bail rollout has been called out, your name's not on the list, and you think, well, this application certainly not went in. There's people's applications who came in and went in long after you, and these people are getting bail or refused. During this time, it's established that there's exactly 7.5 ounces of this, what they're alleging is amphetamine. And they're threatening to take you to the High Court. At the same time, remanded in custody, there was a scrap metal merchant who had been caught with 5 kilos of real amphetamine, and quite powerful amphetamine. And he was looking at about 12 months in prison, was going to a summary court. I am being presented before the High Court and looking at 5-year and above. So you're going through your remand period. The legal team doesn't turn up, doesn't address phone calls, doesn't address requests for a chase up the High Court bail. And then suddenly they reappear on the doorstep. Another solicitor appears on the doorstep of the prison, telling you that your original solicitor is no longer on the case. When asked what's happening with the new forensic report, and they say they don't know anything about it. And apparently the solicitor had failed to pass on the documents that we had presented for the defence, and certainly for the investigatory process or the proof or the craving of an independent forensic report, which wouldn't have been a problem in an application for. You didn't really need proof for that. You just need to dispute what the Strathclyde forensics have come up with. And under the equality arms, you'd be entitled to have an equivalent report that maybe shows something different that could come at your defence. And if that report that you're applying for is going to substantiate a report that suggests that it's not amphetamine, not a classified drug, therefore no charge can be preferred against you, you shouldn't have been in the court in the first place, you know. When it's that's the situation, never in your mind would you ever think that you'd be prosecuted. Never in your mind would you ever consider that this is going to go any further. And because of Detective Sergeant David Bullen, his intentions at the police station, what you've told the solicitor that's left the case all about that, and he's supposed to be looking into that as well. To find out you've now got a solicitor who barely knows anything about the case, and he's there and he's advising me to plead guilty. Right? And I'm thinking to myself, why would I plead guilty? And he gives it away, right? He gives it away. He gives something away. And I don't let on that I've noticed this, you see. Now, what the arrangement was, the boy who was my co-accused, the elderly guy, he continued to visit me in prison and make sure that I had money for my canteen and groceries, basically. And the discussions that had been led was, I found out who was responsible for the lignocaine and the noradrenaline, and how it all worked out and how it all came about. Okay, so that was my discovery, and the conversation that took place was well, I can't really see how any of us are going to get to jail, but if the evidence starts going one way or another, I'll automatically plead guilty. And that was agreed. So this man, because of his age, his elderly condition, his physical condition, his health, he's on his way out. They're threatening me, threatening the 2 years with 5 years and above. And we're thinking to ourselves, well, at that point in time, there's something else happens in the position where they're trying to get a verdict on by any means. And the threats and the intimidation and the coercive control, the whole system, not the whole system, but the whole operation of providing legal services, the coercive control of that, that's been made available to you and was being denied to you, certainly makes an awful lot of unjust enrichment for the courts and the private sectors that oversee it now. And certainly did make an awful lot of clobber for creating Scotland's biggest embarrassment. And everybody from here to Timbuktu knows why that was done. So you think you would never be in a position of sitting with a solicitor where you'd be thinking about pleading guilty. You are in conversation with a man who you've said, look, if evidence starts to go my way, you'll plead guilty. So I was at court on the Monday, and on the Friday night, the solicitor and the acting Queen's Counsel comes up. And they suggest that this man is turning Queen's evidence against me, and it'd be better that I pled guilty as not to let his evidence come into court. And I said, well, what evidence can he bring? And they showed me a police report where, after forensics were taken from the jacket, the tweed jacket that had the cat hairs, and forensics were taken for the man's house that would have shown the same cat hairs, it was decided that the jacket was mine, and this was the way the police had written it up. That was undoubtedly my jacket, and it was inconceivable to think that a man who was 68 years of age, would have anything to do with amphetamine, and especially his good, respectable lady friend, as she was now getting presented to be. And I thought, that's horrific. There's no way I'm going to stop that. And then I questioned whether he would actually go to that extent. And over that weekend, whilst lying in remand, I sort of half expected that I was going to have to plead guilty anyway, because the legal team wasn't doing its job. The access to justice that was made available to me, I'd been absolutely screwed. There was no way I was going to get anywhere with this. And really, the reason I was in Edinburgh because of what happened in Falkirk and the destruction to my businesses there and stuff like that, it was just, I couldn't, I was in a remand period. I was playing in a musical outfit in the remand period with other prisoners. I was doing things. Life was a damn sight easier than having everybody basically on your back for Police Scotland, as they're known now. And having to duck and dive that and go about a normal life whilst they try to tie everything to you. Doesn't matter where you turn up, what you do, they're in there interfering some way or another. And that's something that's an awful lot of people has come to recognise, and they basically tell them to go and take a fuck for themselves. And we got on with it. And that's always been the case. So on the Monday, I goes into court, and my co-accused is in court. And with a brief chance to speak just before court, and I says to him, you realise what happens if I plead guilty here? He says, yeah, my QC's told me I'll walk. Because he's still going to do that. As if that was an agreed thing that was a definite. And I was like thinking to myself, well, that was only a thing that was going to happen if there was any evidence at all that they could procure saying that it was amphetamine, which it wasn't. Even when I was under the impression that it was amphetamine and what I was looking at, I was still considering, way back in the early days of the legal challenge, well, I just plead guilty to this. So I had my own personal reasons as to why maybe a big sentence would have been beneficial to me, that just kept me out the road of the police. And back then, the police had nothing to do with prisons. They weren't allowed to go into prisons, really. And a Crown estate. But now they can, and the offices there, and you've no idea the hell it's come to play in prisons because of that. In fact, anywhere Police Scotland's got an office in my life, you've no idea what's come to happen in these services since them getting their offices. It's been absolutely hectic to watch the statements have been changed and the things that are put inquisitorially to a process. So by this Monday, I've been remanded for 3.5 months, 2 30-day extensions. I'm on the last day, the 30-day. We don't know what the problem is. I think what the problem is me doing all the shouting to get these examinations done and no one answering it. And it all been covered up by suggesting that the original solicitors went off the case and the new solicitors doesn't know nothing about any of this. And by this time, I've not got access to the original report, which the other solicitor had, although I did get 10 copies eventually printed off. And I still hold the copies to this day. The man who wrote the report is still alive to this day, and he still remembers the case very, very well to this day. Because him, like everyone else, can't believe that anyone went to prison for this. Especially on the idea that my co-accused was convinced and persuaded to turn evidence against me. And he done that when I was more than prepared and willing to plead guilty in the first place. My knowledge in the law at that time told me I shouldn't be in the High Court, that a 5-year sentence would not be achievable, considering the scrap metal merchant did go to court and only received 12 months. His case was done and dusted in no time, although it was more complex, there was more officers involved, and it was a large search of a scrap metal yard. And this was something that happened in a hotel. We were arrested, and with reports that was switched by the police. No doubt thought up when David Bullen was storming about the office and how he was going to get to me, and how for 10 years he was trying to get to me. Just like all other coppers, that's what I was living with, and that's what I was considering getting away from by getting the jail, So it was there in the start of the case. It was there throughout the case that I'd maybe potentially plead guilty to this. And by the time I'd go to the High Court, I was absolutely scunnered with everything. Seriously scunnered. We went into the High Court, we were in the dock, and their names were called for, and agreed that was their names. The Queen's Counsel for my co-accused stood up, rumbled something under his breath. I have no idea what it was. And the High Court judge came straight to me and asked how I was pleading. Now, there was already pleas to not guilty tendered. And the way it worked out, it was just switched to me to see if I was going to be changing my plea, because it then allowed my co-accused to walk, and everybody knew that was what was on the doors. So I said that I was changing my plea to guilty, because it wouldn't have been of any benefit to put my co-accused through a trial, even though I was curious to see whether he would say the things that he was alleged to have written in his statement. And looking back at the history, the reality of myself and the police, I'm quite happy to consider that that man never wrote these statements, and it wasn't that convincing in the statements at all. If he made a statement at all, he was maybe spoken to, and he was maybe just playing the water to see how it would pan out. I don't think he ever made statements though, and if he did, they wouldn't have been strong. That's what he was suggesting, because these were completely fabricated. There was nothing like this ever took place between us. There was nothing like this ever happened. And it even came up, the police also put in a statement suggesting that when they searched the elderly man's address that same night, that there was audio recordings of me on a telephone suggesting that all the packages were wrapped up and they're ready for sale type thing. And words that were used like that. And this is at a time where I had refused to use telephones. I can't even remember if I had a telephone at the time, but I definitely didn't make any message. And that was used as evidence as well. But how they never actually had a copy of the recording, because they didn't, because there wasn't one, was by claiming they didn't know how to use the answer phone machine. They didn't know they had to press button B or something to save it, and it naturally deleted itself. The legal team did say to me on the Friday, you do realise that we could get a forensic analysis of the machine to see if what the officer's claiming he heard is actually there. And I invited the legal team to do that. I said, you certainly do that, because any kind of message that's there that can be found, I'll rule out the fact that it was me, right? And and I'm still going on about, we need another forensic report. This isn't amphetamine. We shouldn't be going to court amphetamine. I'm sitting going on like that, and they're treating me like somebody who they can't speak to about the case, because they want to talk about pleading guilty or what it's going to be like if I go through a trial. How bad it's going to be. So you're like a pinball in a very controlled pinball game. There's no spontaneity to it at all. And it was all directed to go in the one direction, and horrifically it did. Now, when I pled guilty, the judge thanked me and went straight to, I think the judge could see what was going on, but it went straight to my co-accused and said to him, he goes, are you maintaining your plea not guilty? He confirms that. And even though the order were in the dock, the way we should have been addressed by the court, would have put us in a reverse order. So when he says he was pleading not guilty, the judge says, the PF stood up and said that he was accepting the plea not guilty and there was no further action against my co-accused. And the judge says, you're free to leave the dock. And he did. He walked past me, left the dock, sat in the back of the court. And he goes, now you, Mr. Fraser. He goes, I find it very surprising that you are in my court. And he goes on about, he goes, this offence has been committed. Let me tell you now. He goes, I don't know how it's even passed the sheriff court. How it passed the sheriff court to come into my court. And he went round to the procurator, the prosecuting advocate, and says to him, let it be made clear to the police officers involved in this in the investigation, let it be made clear from me how obvious it is when things are trying to be accelerated against someone, the particular reasons as to how that happens. And this is certainly one of these cases. And this judge is basically identifying the way the police have behaved right through the process, and even getting it into the High Court in the first place was something that the judge had noticed and thought there's something fucking wrong with this. And the plea deals and the things that went on there's something real wrong with this. And when the judge asked me if I got anything to say about the offence, I had said that I didn't think that this case should be in the High Court either, and asked him to take into consideration the time I've spent in custody, if thinking about a custodial. I says, but up until coming into that situation in Edinburgh, I had nothing to do with amphetamine. I had nothing to do with any kind of illicit behaviour or paraphernalia, drug or anything. And if I had went home that night, I would have had nothing further more to do with it. But I am in your court and I pled guilty. He goes, I appreciate that. And stopped me from talking because he realised I was going to start to say stuff that he would have caused him not to be able to accept my plea guilty, having already asked my co-accused to leave. It was okay for her to leave the dock. So he shut me up, and he gave a really stern warning to the cops involved, and how the prosecuting advocate must make sure that they get to know that was his comments. They wanted it put there directly. And the procurator, the advocate, he's agreeing to this. As he comes back to me, he goes, well, we're both in agreement that this shouldn't be in our court. He goes, but I must look at a sentence. And because of the way this guy's been talking in my favour, I'm thinking, he's going to let me go home, right? This is something that he knows I shouldn't have been anywhere near. I'm not going to get a custodial here. And that was just simply wishful thinking, because he said that it didn't deserve a high court powers of sentencing. It's something that could quite easily have been dealt with the sheriff court, and for that reason he's going to sentence me to 30 months. There's an apparent Bail Act offence that was technically wasn't right, but it wasn't found by the High Court at that time. The legal team hadn't pointed anything out about it either. So I was found. I think it was 9 months for the Bail Act, and that was to run consecutively. And the long and short of it was, I still thought that was excessive. So I appealed against that, and I got it dropped to. I can't mind where I got it dropped to. I just knew that when I got word through me off my appeal, and that my sentence had been reduced, I only had 11 days left to go. But up until I got word through, I still had about 18 months to go. No, sorry, I still had about 9 months to go. So everything worked out well, as far as all that's concerned. But the reason I'm talking about it is because where you're not responsible for what's going on, even if it were amphetamine, when it comes to notifying a legal team for at least 3 months that this isn't amphetamine, there's a full report written by a specialist that would normally cost hundreds of pounds to get it. And the man himself told me if he was writing a report for that for a court, which he was licensed to do, he also could write the court, and he'd been brought in as a special witness in many cases in the past. He had wrote plenty of court reports and told me at a very minimum that one page that he had written me would have cost me about £800. And he done it free. He was happy to do it. He could see in me, by playing me at chess, that I wasn't a person that used drugs, amphetamine, had any behavioural aspects to all that. And he was someone who was highly qualified and known what all that was. I met a good guy I could play chess. I've had a friend for for life, basically. An old friend died before I got out, so I was right to plead guilty. I was wrongfully in the court in the first place, and with a wee bit of conniving with someone who either David Bullen or someone with his intent. There a wee fiddle on the reports there, and a deliberate, proactive attempt never to get a proper analysis of the powder that was taken. And I even know the history of the powder. The lignocaine came from a dentist, and the noradrenaline came from a practicing. This person was a practicing nurse, but he was also an ambulance driver. So he was training to be a fully qualified nurse, and he was getting access to this, and that's how it happened. And that was the guy that went and done what the police had hoped for 5 years or more. So when you've got cases like that going through the Scottish courts, and these things can happen, and you start to identify how they happened, and what should have prevented it in the law, what could have prevented it in the law, and it was just a general application for another forensic report to be done. Why that wasn't done is because people want you to go to jail. Why would they change the reports to make it look like you had a 68-year-old man's jacket on that night with a tweed hat when the rest of you was leather belt, jeans, biking boots, gloves, with a tweed jacket and a hat? I'm sure that didn't happen. I'm sure the biking jacket wasn't getting worn by a 68-year-old man. And I'm sure the woman had a damn sight more to do with it, because she was able to write, I know at least one of the gentlemen that I was with tonight had £2,000 worth of speedy stuff. So even she knew that it wasn't amphetamine. It was speedy stuff, something that was the equivalent, the same of. She had a prior knowledge when in the police station that was not amphetamine. I was the only person that never even knew that was what it was, or even the fact that it was there. So, but I was the only one that went to prison. We will be looking at that case in more depth, but for now I'm just quite happy to get that case out the road. There are an awful lot of stuff involved in that case that I've not mentioned, that took place in the process of communicating with solicitors, communicating with courts, communicating with the clerk in the Procurator Fiscal Service in Edinburgh, and the letters that I wrote, I've still got a few of them, the information that I gave, and the duty that was on the Procurator Fiscal, the Lying Court at the time, and then the Prosecutor Advocate in the High Court, to produce and double question their own evidence and look at it again, because none of it was accurate. You could quite easily see that it had all been shift changes right over to me, and the clothes and the fashion of the clothes where I told you everything. I would have looked ridiculous in an old man's tweed jacket with an old spiv hat on, when my lower half was everything to do with motorbike, and my gloves would have suggested motorbike. I would have looked ridiculous dressed like that. But no, none of the legal team was thinking, accepting the obvious in that. Now, it's quite interesting, because the only reason I went back to that legal team was because after what had happened between the ages of 16 and 19, I thought I'd drop it on their doorstep, as I've quickly discovered there wasn't a solicitor anywhere that was going to represent me. So when I dropped it on their doorstep and they took up the case, I thought, there's no way they're going to try and do anything that I've identified that went on in the past that seemed to have been criminalised in the first place. So there you go. Later, we'll be looking at Bodom in Scotland and Peterhead Sheriff Court. Thanks for listening.